The call came in at 8:43 p.m., a frantic, breathless voice on the other end of the line. "Oh my God, please. There's so much blood." Caitlin Carter was hysterical, her voice shaking as she struggled to explain what she had just walked into. The Austin Police Department arrived at 1708 Maple Avenue within minutes. Officers rushed inside, weapons drawn, unsure of what to expect. The house was eerily quiet, except for the muffled sound of Caitlin's sobs as she stood outside, her hands clutching her phone in a death grip. Then they found her. Mariah Wilson, just 25 years old, lay sprawled on the cold tile floor of the bathroom. Her once vibrant eyes were vacant, her skin pale, and the pool of deep crimson blood surrounding her body told a horrific story. At first glance, officers suspected a botched robbery. The front door was slightly open, a few items were knocked over, and there were smears of blood leading down the hallway. But then, the details started to unravel that theory. Mariah's wallet and phone sat untouched on the counter. There were no signs of forced entry, and most chilling of all, her injuries weren't random. They were precise, deliberate, personal. The detectives exchanged uneasy glances as they scanned the crime scene. This wasn't some desperate thief caught in the act. This was something far more sinister. Whoever did this hadn't come to steal. They had come to kill. And with no witnesses and no immediate suspects, the case was already shaping up to be one of the most chilling murders Austin had seen in years. The gruesome reality of what had happened to Mariah Wilson became clear. She had been shot multiple times, the bullet wounds clean and precise. There was no struggle, no chance for her to fight back. Whoever had pulled the trigger had done so with deadly accuracy, ensuring she died instantly. But the scene didn't look like a typical robbery turned murder. As officers searched the home, they discovered one glaring inconsistency. Mariah's $114,000 racing bike was missing. Mariah had been a rising star in the cycling world, her talent making her one of the most promising athletes in the sport. The high-end racing bike was her prized possession, and now it was gone. At first, investigators latched onto the most logical theory. Had Mariah been targeted for her expensive bike? It seemed possible. Bike thefts had been rising in the area, and a professional racing bike worth over 6 figures could be an easy target for a desperate thief. But then, detectives started noticing things that didn't add up. There were no signs of forced entry. Mariah had either let her killer in or the person had a way inside. Her wallet, phone, and personal belongings were left untouched. Why take the bike but nothing else of value? And then came the most chilling discovery. Mariah had been involved in a complicated romantic relationship, one that, according to her text messages, had been filled with secrets, betrayal, and jealousy. The missing bike was no longer the biggest clue. This wasn't about theft, this was about revenge. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something far darker than a simple robbery, a deadly love triangle that would soon shock the nation. As investigators sifted through the details of Mariah Wilson's brutal murder, one name kept surfacing: Colin Parker. A well-known cyclist and Mariah's former lover, Colin wasn't just a casual acquaintance, he was the last person to see her alive. Detectives got their first major lead from Caitlin Carter, the woman who had made the horrific 911 call after discovering Mariah's body. Through shaky breaths and red-rimmed eyes, Caitlin explained what she knew. Mariah was with Colin Parker earlier that evening, she told detectives. She was excited. She said he invited her over. That changed everything. Colin Parker wasn't just a familiar name. He was now the prime suspect, unraveling the last hours. Investigators traced Mariah's movements that night. Earlier on May 11, 2022, she had gone to meet Colin. They had spent time together at a local cafe before heading back to her apartment at 1708 Maple Avenue. At around 8:30 p.m., neighbors reported hearing voices inside. Nothing alarming, just a conversation. But by 9 p.m., everything went silent. And by 8:43 p.m., Caitlin Carter walked in to find Mariah dead on the bathroom floor. It was a narrow window, and Colin was now at the center of it. When detectives brought him in for questioning, Colin's demeanor was calm but distant. "Yes, I was with her that night," he admitted. "But I left before anything happened. She was fine when I left." He had no solid alibi, just his word. The black Jeep. But then, investigators got a breakthrough. Surveillance footage from a neighboring house showed something chilling. Just before the time of the murder, a black Jeep was seen slowly circling the block. At 8:36 p.m., it was captured stopping near Mariah's home. At 8:41 p.m., it was seen again, speeding away. The footage was grainy, but the outline of the vehicle was clear enough. Colin Parker didn't drive a black Jeep, but someone very close to him did. This wasn't just about a lover's quarrel gone wrong. This was about jealousy, obsession, and revenge. And the black Jeep's owner was about to take this case in a chilling new direction. Colin Parker sat across from the detectives, arms crossed, his face a careful mask of calm detachment. "Yes, I was with Mariah that night," he admitted. "We had drinks, talked, but I left her apartment at 8:30 p.m. She was alive when I left." It was a straightforward alibi, but was it airtight? Detectives dug into Colin's timeline, pulling phone records, traffic cameras, and witness statements. Surprisingly, it held up. His phone pinged near his home at 8:45 p.m., just 2 miles away. Security footage from his apartment's parking lot showed him arriving alone. Colin may have been the last person to see Mariah alive, but he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. But if it wasn't Colin, then who? Investigators turned back to the black Jeep seen circling Mariah's home just before the murder. After running the plates, the answer came back loud and clear. The car wasn't Colin's. It belonged to Jessica Armstrong, Colin's current girlfriend. Jessica had been dating Colin for over a year, and by all outward appearances, she was a dedicated partner. But behind the polished image, investigators found something far more unsettling. Jessica Armstrong had a history of jealousy, especially when it came to Mariah Wilson, a dangerous obsession. Friends and former coworkers described Jessica as possessive, territorial, and prone to outbursts. She hated that Colin and Mariah ever dated, one friend told investigators. She was obsessed with her. Jessica had reportedly snooped through Colin's phone, looking for any lingering messages from Mariah. She would go silent for hours if Colin so much as mentioned her name. And then there was the most disturbing piece of evidence yet. Just weeks before the murder, Jessica had sent threatening messages to Mariah. "Stay away from Colin. You're not part of his life anymore. You don't belong here." Mariah never responded. She ignored the threats. But now, with Mariah dead and Jessica's black Jeep caught near the crime scene, ignoring the warning was no longer an option. The new prime suspect. Jessica Armstrong wasn't just a jealous girlfriend anymore. She was now the prime suspect in a cold, blood-blooded murder, and investigators were about to uncover just how far she was willing to go to keep Colin all to herself. The pieces were falling into place. Jessica Armstrong wasn't just a jealous girlfriend, she was a predator. Investigators combed through security footage, phone records, and witness reports, and what they found sent a chill through the entire case. Jessica had been tracking Colin and Mariah the night of the murder. Through cell tower pings, detectives discovered that Jessica's phone had followed Colin's movements that evening, first to the cafe, then to Mariah's apartment at 1708 Maple Avenue. But the most damning evidence? The black Jeep in the alley. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera captured the unmistakable black Jeep Wrangler creeping through the alley behind Mariah's house at 8:36 p.m. The headlights flicked off, the car idled for several minutes. At 8:41 p.m., just before gunshots rang out, the Jeep sped away. It was no coincidence. Jessica had been there. A gun that matches the crime. While searching Jessica's home, detectives found a chilling discovery: a 9mm handgun tucked away in a safe. It was the same model as the weapon used to kill Mariah Wilson. The ballistics report wasn't back yet, but investigators already knew. They had their killer. Jessica Armstrong had followed them. She had waited in the shadows. She had pulled the trigger. But why? Was it jealous rage, a moment of blind fury, or had she been planning this for far longer than anyone realized? Closing in on the truth. With overwhelming evidence piling up, detectives were one step away from making their move. Jessica Armstrong had killed to eliminate her competition. But now it was her turn to be hunted. The evidence against Jessica Armstrong was overwhelming. The black Jeep, the gun, the security footage, everything pointed to her as Moriah Wilson's killer. But Jessica was one step ahead. Before police could issue an arrest warrant, Jessica did something no one expected. She vanished. The Great Escape. Detectives arrived at Jessica's home, ready to bring her in. But when they knocked on the door, there was no answer. The house was empty. Her phone was off, her car abandoned, and her social media accounts deleted. Jessica Armstrong was gone. A stolen identity. Investigators worked around the clock to track her down. What they discovered was both cunning and chilling. Jessica had stolen her sister's passport and used it to board a flight out of the country. Her destination? Costa Rica. By the time authorities traced her movements, Jessica had already vanished into the tropical landscapes of Central America. A new face, a new life. Jessica didn't just hide, she transformed. She altered her appearance with plastic surgery, cutting her hair short, changing her eye color with contacts, and even modifying her nose and jawline. She wasn't Jessica Armstrong anymore. Now, she was a yoga instructor under a fake name, blending in with the expat community in Costa Rica. For a while, she lived freely, assuming she had escaped justice forever. Setting the trap. But investigators weren't giving up. They knew Jessica was in Costa Rica. They knew she had limited funds and needed a way to survive. So they set a brilliant trap. They posted a fake job ad for an exclusive yoga instructor position at a high-end wellness resort. The job offered cash payments, private accommodations, and no background checks. Exactly what a fugitive like Jessica would jump at. And she did. The arrest. On the morning of June 27, 2023, Jessica arrived at the job interview. She walked into the luxurious beachfront villa, dressed in yoga attire, completely unaware that she was being watched. As soon as she stepped inside, federal agents surrounded her. Jessica Armstrong, you're under arrest. Her face went ghost white. She tried to run, but there was nowhere left to hide. Extradited back to the U.S. Within hours, Jessica was on a flight back to the United States, handcuffed, her new life shattered. She had fled across borders, changed her face, and reinvented her identity, but justice still caught up to her. Now she would finally face the consequences for Moriah Wilson's murder. Jessica Armstrong had spent over a year on the run, but now she sat in a cold, sterile courtroom, her fate finally catching up to her. The trial began in November 2023, drawing national attention. The case wasn't just about Moriah Wilson's murder, it was about obsession, jealousy, and calculated revenge. Jessica had done everything in her power to escape justice, but now the evidence was overwhelming, and the prosecution made sure there was no way out. The prosecution's case. The state presented their case with precision, breaking Jessica's web of lies piece by piece. Surveillance footage placed her black Jeep near Moriah's house just before the murder. Ballistic tests proved that Jessica's gun was an exact match to the shell casings found at the scene. Forensic evidence showed she had been stalking Moriah and tracking Colin's movements the night of the murder. Her escape attempt, using her sister's passport, getting plastic surgery, and fleeing to Costa Rica, painted a clear picture of guilt. The prosecution's final argument was devastating. This wasn't a crime of passion, the lead prosecutor told the jury. This was a premeditated execution. Jessica Armstrong didn't just want Moriah out of Colin Parker's life. She wanted her dead. Jessica's defense falls apart. Jessica's defense team tried everything to cast doubt. They claimed she was nowhere near the crime scene, but the security footage said otherwise. They argued that her gun had been stolen, but there were no reports of theft. They even suggested that Colin Parker himself might have been involved, but his airtight alibi destroyed that theory. As Jessica sat at the defense table, her once cold, defiant expression began to crack. She knew. The jury didn't believe a word of it. The verdict. After only 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. The entire courtroom held its breath. On the charge of first-degree murder, he announced, "We find the defendant, Jessica Armstrong, guilty." A gasp rippled through the room. Her face was stone cold, but her fingers gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. The judge wasted no time. "Jessica Armstrong," he said, "for the murder of Moriah Wilson, I hereby sentence you to 90 years in prison without the possibility of parole." Justice, finally. As Jessica was led away in handcuffs, the weight of her obsession-fueled crime finally crushed her. Moriah Wilson had lost her life because of Jessica's jealousy and rage. Now, Jessica had lost hers behind bars. Jealousy is a dangerous poison, and obsession is its most lethal form. Jessica Armstrong let her insecurities, rage, and need for control consume her, turning her into a cold-blooded killer. She thought that by eliminating Moriah Wilson, she could erase the past and keep Colin Parker to herself. But murder doesn't erase the truth. It exposes it. No crime is perfect. Jessica believed she could commit the perfect crime. She planned it carefully. She stalked Moriah, watched her every move, and chose the exact moment to strike. She even fled the country, altered her appearance, and tried to start over. But no matter how much she ran, hid, or changed, the evidence never lied. The black Jeep placed her at the scene. The security footage showed her lurking in the shadows. The ballistics report tied the murder weapon back to her. And her desperate escape only confirmed what the police already knew. She was guilty. Justice always catches up. Jessica thought she was untouchable, that she could outsmart the law. But justice is relentless. It may take weeks, months, or even years, but the truth always surfaces. Jessica Armstrong lost everything: her freedom, her future, and her place in society, all because she let jealousy turn into murder. And in the end, the very thing she feared losing the most, control, was stripped away forever.